All right, so a little change in the plans for today. We were going to do a video comparing some chain. It's just I didn't get far enough in my cleaning to locate my raker gauge to make sure my rakers were set up. It's buried here somewhere on the floor. So if you've seen the last video, we made a bit of a mess. My workbench tipped over, but I'm working on reorganizing the shop. So I'll kind of show you what she looks like right now. We're getting there. It's a lot of the big stuff is done. I'm down to like all the tools, like organizing all the tools and things like that. So just a matter of time. It might be done here by the end of the day. Just depends. It's cold out. I don't know if I really feel like hanging out here today and doing this, but we are going to run a saw. So instead of doing the video comparing my race chains, like my round race grind and my square hand file, and comparing them to a C83, we are going to run the least light saw that I've built. This is the one that the fewest number of people like. It gets the fewest number of comments, fewest number of likes, all that stuff. This is the least liked saw out of everything that I've built. I think the last time I put a video out on it, it got 4 comments, where it's not uncommon for me to see 20 or 30 comments in a video. You know what I mean? So it's definitely the least liked saw that I have done. And we'll kind of get over that. I broke a lot of rules whenever I built this thing. Those of you who sat and watched the build process and everything, you know that I kind of broke a lot of rules. I was receiving emails saying how much I did it wrong and it's going to perform like crap and all that stuff. You know what I mean? But we went with it anyway, and we've been running it. We're going to run a tack on it today, though. So today we're actually going to see how many RPM it cuts in the wood. And the chain it looks pretty freaking hungry. So she should be pulling pretty hard on the saw. It's a 28-inch, it is a 20-inch bar with an 8-pin sprocket. This is a saw that I was building for the races. So this is basically the way I would like to run it at the races. Now, one of the things I have never revealed is that we are not finished with this saw. This saw has a future, I've planned a future out for this saw, and that's kind of why I built it the way that I did. I just never really got into that yet because it's a little cold to get into that kind of work right now. We just got it running in its current configuration. It's running a 94-degree exhaust roof. Transfers are like 124, I believe, and the intake's sitting at like 83. It does run like it has too much intake timing. You do get spit pack at the low RPM, idle and so forth, which might cause trouble down the road. We'll see. But, we're going to give it a run today and see if she's really as bad as what I think a lot of people might think it is. Last video, the chain wasn't hungry enough, and we're still on the break-in side of this saw. But let's see how bad it really is. Let's see if this thing really does perform as bad as what I think a lot of people think it does. I'm wondering if some people might think that I'm kind of trying to hide its real performance, like trying to make it scream. It's a 94-degree exhaust roof, so this thing is going to be zingy. It's not going to have that real hard 4-stroke on the top end and all that stuff. This thing is very zingy. You know what I mean? It's just whenever you build stuff like this, they run differently than what you might be accustomed to on a lot of your really high torque power, whatever builds for long bars and everything. So this one definitely runs differently. You know what I mean? But I don't know. Like I showed the port work on this saw, and the thing that kind of got me the most is how many people were sending me emails and stuff saying that I just screwed up the whole friggin' thing. We'll get into that after we run it. We'll talk about it, and I'll kind of explain what they were talking about, and and I don't know. We'll kind of get into those details a little more here in a minute. But first, I need to put some charge on this phone. She's almost dead. I'm going to get a fire going while that's going, and then we're going to take this saw out to run. In fact, why don't I just go ahead and give you a quick shot of what I've done to the room, because there's lots changed in what the last video was, what, a day or two ago? 2 days since I recorded that last video. So in 2 days time, a couple hours here and there's been a few changes in the shop. Alrighty. So there's my workbench. We did keep her intact, but you can see she's a train wreck right now. I'm just picking stuff up, throwing it on the bench, and then I slowly organizing and putting it away. The problem is I got to deal with that pile of mess right there yet. So yeah, it's going to be a process to get everything put away. But as you can see, we decided to go ahead and keep the old workbench, and we just extended it all the way to the corner down here. Just used whatever lumber I had laying around, which I can tell you this is every last bit of scrap lumber I had left. I literally have nothing left. This was it. So we managed to pull her off. We extended her all the way down to the end. We put our little lathe here. Drill press, I don't know if that's where it's going to be. I don't have it bolted down or nothing yet. You know what I mean? The lathe is set up though. That's where I want that lathe. The grinder and the belt sander, they're just kind of sitting there. I don't know if that's going to be their permanent home. Welder, probably going to stay there. My leads are long enough that I can get halfway out the driveway, so it doesn't really need to wander off very far. You know what I mean? But, the old stick welder's probably going to stay there. The MIG is sitting there. I'm planning on mounting that on a cart. So it's just sitting there because, I'm going to put that in another machine on a cart that I can cart around. I just need to get an extension cord, 240 volt extension cord to make it work well. The lathe here, this big lathe, this is not its permanent home. It's just kind of sitting there. So whenever we get the outside furnace, I decided I'm going to go ahead and pull the wood burner, get it out of here. I'll put the heating unit in the shop from the outside furnace, and we'll put the lathe up here, and that'll enable me to extend this bench all the way to that corner. All right, so there she is. A lot of you are familiar with this. It's a 372 Pro, redone with a big bore top end, ported about as hot as I felt comfortable doing a port job. We'll see how she runs. We're gonna put the tack on it. We're gonna see how many RPM she pulls in the wood and all that stuff, and then we're going to kind of talk about it a little bit. She's always been like the least favorite video among viewers. You know what I mean? The viewers just don't seem to respond to this one. So I think it's just, personally, I think viewers prefer more of the firewood stuff and not stuff like this. That's what I think. But, some folks think I did it wrong. Like the stuff I did would have caused it to lose performance, and we're going to see what she performs like to kind of confirm whether or not they're right. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get her warmed up and get the tack on it. This is a fairly hungry chain with an 8-pin sprocket on hardwood. We're not going to cut any softwood. We're going to run it on hard stuff.
So, kind of interesting results. I was actually surprised, but we'll go over that here in a second. The funny thing is, the salt's faster rich, like at the point where it's wanting to break up. That's where it's fastest at. I wonder if I need to go hotter on the plug or something to help clean that up. But that's what you're noticing with that 4-stroke, that popping, which is faster when it's like that. But I don't know. I wonder if we do need to go richer. Let me go over the details here. It's cold out. I want to go into by the heat. It's only like freaking 15 degrees out here. You know what I mean? Kind of an interesting result there. The fastest cut was, or the fastest cuts, like it was obvious to the feel. The best stuff was whenever she was on the fat side at the point where she was wanting to break up. So, I'm going to say we might need to go hotter on a plug or something. I think she's a number 8 plug right now. We'll take her to a number 7. I'm like 90% certain she's running on a number 8 plug though. We'll try it on a number 7. What else? Well, here's the intro. You ready to hear the numbers, the actual RPM numbers? So I was able to get it to go as high as 12,900. That's like the very highest number I could get it to go to. That was without a lot of pushing. That was, self-feed, all that stuff. You know what I mean? And then as I went through it and kept pushing and, we kept working the saw a little harder and harder. 12.5 to 12.7, probably, I would say that became pretty common numbers to see. Now I would drop it down to 12,000. And there was once or twice that I got it to go below 12,000. So like 11.8 or something like that. Most of my cutting on a daily basis would probably end up around 12.2. Now, like say whenever I was hogging on it harder and harder, and I was getting it to go down to 12,000, whenever I started riching it up from that point, that 12,000 number changed to where it was coming up to like 12.2. So under a heavier load with me pushing it through the cut, it changed from a 12 to a 12.2, but the richness of the tune got to a point where she was wanting to break up. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, where it was getting faster as I was making it richer, that breakup might also be a timing issue. Couldn't it? Before, we could be early or late. I think she's at factory timing right now. So I would assume we're running late. But I don't know, that almost makes me think it's running early. I don't know. We might have to play with that timing a little bit. You know what I mean? And see if we can clean that up. We'll start with a hotter plug, see if that does anything, but then we'll start playing with the timing. I think she just needs a little bit of a timing thing, or a little bit of a spark. I think it's spark related is why we're seeing that. Might be interpreting it as a rich tune when it's actually a spark related thing. That's what I'm thinking, because it gets faster as I richen it. So I was running it too lean before, even though I was able to pull more RPM with it leaner. As I richened it up, it was pulling with more torque, which was, the torque is where your speed and your cut is really going to come from. But I can say out of all of those cuts, only a few dropped below 12,000. The average probably, well, let's say between 12.2 and 12.7, with the most common number being right around 12.5. I'd say that's probably the safe bet of where we could go with that. I got it to 12.9. She's free revving. She's free revving at 13, like 880, 13.9. So that's where she's free revving at. But I could not get it to hold in the cut at 13. Probably will be able to in the future. We're going to make a couple of changes to this thing here in the future, which should get it to exceed 13. We'll probably be running in the mid 13s or plus, maybe 14 or 15 till we're done. So, for what it is right now, it's gas, it's ported. I think she's running pretty dang good, especially pulling an 8-pin sprocket. The chain is that's whenever you see me grinding my chains and running in the wood and all that, I mean, that's what you're looking at. That's one of my normal sharpenings on one of my chains. Cutting nice and smooth and straight and sharp and everything. Definitely didn't do it any favors. So, the worst thing about this saw is the way it idles. She's really funky at the low RPM, the idle and all that stuff. I mean, it'll sit there and idle all day. She just sounds funky, If I try to lean it out, it just doesn't work. But other than that, it's fine. It's just she runs weird at idle. You know what I mean? But this saw does. I mean, I'll say that this saw consistently stays above 12,000 RPM without any trouble. You can get it to go more. Like I could lean it out more and get it to go probably to 13, but I'm not going to because I feel like it's faster in the cut because I'm using the torque on a richer tune. You know what I mean? Keeping the RPM down a little more. Now, as far as this being the least liked saw, like I showed the whole build of this saw, and I received some emails and so forth, and a lot of folks were telling me that what I was doing would cause it to lose performance. It would hurt it, you know what I mean? And I kind of brushed it off for the most part. People didn't really leave it in the comments. Like it was like they were trying to be respectful, They didn't want to say it in the comments. They were sending me the emails and stuff. but I didn't really say a whole lot about it. Just because I think whenever you're in my position, you get a different perspective of the build than if you're on the other side of the camera. You know what I mean? But basically, the main concern is that whenever I did work at the lowers in the lower region of the saw, I significantly increased the volume of the crankcase. Significantly. Like if you look at all the work I did, it would have changed the volume of the crankcase significantly. And that's been kind of like this general rule to stay away from doing. You don't want to increase the volume of your crankcase because you can hurt your performance. And I have always kept kind of quiet about that whole thing for the most part. And whenever I do talk about it, it's more about, it's not just about like opening up the volume of the crankcase, it's about where you do it at. So if you open it up here, you can increase performance. If you do it here, you decrease performance. And if you do both and just remove as much material as you possibly can, then you're typically just going to decrease performance. And that's where I think a lot of test results people have done are coming from, is like whenever they get into the bottom of the engine, like the lower transfers, and then doing trenching and or whatever you want to call it at the crankcase and stuff. A lot of folks have a tendency to lean and get a little too far. Like there's areas that can help you and there's areas that can hurt you. And if you end up getting into the areas that hurt you, they just hurt you. Even if you did stuff that can help you, the stuff that hurts you ends up canceling it out and doing probably even more hurt. You know what I mean? So getting a larger volume in the crankcase doesn't necessarily hurt you. You just got to be careful that you do it in a different way, in a proper way or whatever. And that's kind of what I did here. Now folks might say that this performs bad or whatever. I don't care. I mean, she's a 94 degrees Ostroof. I mean, she's zingy as all heck, you know? And I mean, will win any races? I mean, the best saw that wins a race is it's not really the saw, you know. You could have an excellent competitor show up with a stock saw and outrun me, just because he's excellent at what he does, you know. So it's not always the saw. It's usually not the saw. I mean, it's your tool. You do your best to have your tool that at its best possible ability or whatever. But most of the equation has nothing to do with the saw. I mean, you got your chain, your bar. You got the person is most of the equation. Probably 75% of it is the person, their ability to get to the wood and make their good 3 clean cuts. You know what I mean? I mean, that person's ability to sharpen a chain is a big part of the equation, you know? So will this saw win races? We'll see. It may not even make it to the races this year. I might end up doing other stuff to it, and we might take something else. You know what I mean? I have this Dolmar 7900 that I planned on building for that class. And this is actually planned on being built for something else. This is kind of where we're at in the stages. And I wanted to say something about the least liked saw that I have done. Because, you know, doesn't get very many comments, doesn't get very many thumbs up. But that's what the saw actually performs like. And I don't know. Oh, I didn't charge the battery long enough. She's gonna go dead on me. But yeah, that's kind of the way it is. I don't show all my builds. I explain the little bits here and there, you know. But I think one of the biggest problems out there right now is the closed-mindedness of saying do this, don't do that, and if you do anything else, it's wrong. That's probably the biggest problem. And I used to be like that too. I did. It wasn't until I got past that I started exceeding 12,000 RPM cutting regularly. Now, it wasn't until I got past that closed-mindedness that I started exceeding my 12,000 RPM goal. You know, putting a saw through the wood at 12,000 RPM. You gotta be able to be a little. You gotta do a little hotter port work. You know what I mean? And you gotta learn how to do it.
But a lot of times your closed-mindedness will keep you from doing that. But then whenever you start trying to do what I'm doing, like I'm trying to get stuff into the 13,000 RPM now. And so far, I've only been able to achieve it is with alternate fuels. I've gotten into the 12s on gas, but I've not been able to get past the 13 mark unless I went to alternative fuels. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at in our stages. I want to see if I can do it on gas. Because if I can do it on gas and then I throw an alternative fuel to it, what will it go to then? You know what I mean? But yeah, I think closed-mindedness can be the enemy most of the time with a lot of folks. If you get to a point where you get to a performance level and you just, no matter what you do, you can't get past it, this is what's getting in your way. You've made up too many decisions of what the right and wrong way is to do. You know what I mean? You made up your mind whenever you shouldn't have, and you should explore other possibilities. Even the stuff that you thought was hurting you might have not been hurting you as much as you thought it was. You might have been your conclusion that was the problem. I don't know. It's hard to explain. You know what I mean? Ultimately, it's when you're porting, it's not so much about taking away too much material. It's taking away material from areas that you shouldn't. You know what I mean? If you start taking it away from areas that you shouldn't be, then you're going to hurt it. So that's kind of what I think a lot of roadblocks are on getting stuff higher in their performance levels. So if I did this build on like a 98 roof, like this is a 94 roof, this exact same build on a 98 roof is kind of what I did to my pull-in. That pull-in that we've been looking at, the 48 millimeter pull-in build. Basically the exact same build, except it's in a 98 roof. And I would not be surprised if that pull-in was faster than this one. And it's a 48 millimeter build. So I think I went too far on the 94 roof to be running it on gas. I think the better number is probably going to end up being closer to 96. I think the pull-in would do better at a 96 roof. This one's at a 94, and I think a 96 is probably where I'm going to want to settle it, you know, in the end. And we'll have to wait and see until the next build that we do like this. You know what I mean? But I think 96 is where I'm going to settle in at with my builds on gas. My hotter builds on gas. If I'm looking for a lot more torque, they're probably going to be closer to 100, 102, somewhere in there. Depends. I mean, finger ports kind of depend that as well. I mean, without fingers, I'm probably going to lean closer to 104, 102. Don't typically go past 100 without finger ports. So there's another thing to consider. I do finger ports. Do you do finger ports? I don't typically exceed a 100-degree roof without them. So there's another thing to consider. If you've tried a 96 roof before and it didn't run as you had hoped, chances are, you know, try some finger ports. The problem with finger ports is that it kind of, like the whole raising of the transfer discussion, when you go to finger ports, your whole raising of transfers needs to kind of go away. You need to stop doing that kind of stuff to go to fingers. To a point. I mean, you can still raise, but not as much. The finger ports kind of take over in that aspect, if you know what I mean. So, like if you try to go to like raising your transfers and take them to like 113 degrees, like if that's kind of your normal thing, and you start throwing fingers in there, it's not going to work as well. So you want to bump that 113 down into the 20s, 22, 24, somewhere in there with your fingers. At least that's where I'm finding in my experiences. But then you got your finger ports and your bridge ports, and your grinding abilities will greatly determine. Like this is fingers and stuff. That's where your grinding abilities will really, really play a big factor on your performance levels. So it's kind of how it is. But anyway, I think I'm going to stop rambling here. It's been a long little talk, I think. This is probably going to be a 20 or 30 minute video. So, hey, we'll catch you on the next one. Later.